Hey y'all, Dixie here. Hiking the Appalachian Trail in 2015 was the biggest accomplishment of my life. It was a very freeing experience and caused a huge perspective shift for me. So when I got done, I felt like if I could be successful, then pretty much anybody could be. And at that point, I started putting out informational videos, trying to encourage other people to get out on trail. But I wanted to create a one-stop shop type deal where somebody could just come and watch a video and then feel confident about hiking the Appalachian Trail. For those of y'all who are brand new to the AT, it's approximately 2,200 miles long. That fluctuates every year due to reroutes or trail maintenance, but it spans 14 states with the southern terminus located in Georgia at Springer Mountain and the northern terminus in Maine at Mount Katahdin. The idea for the Appalachian Trail was born in 1921 by Benton Mackay, and the AT as a continuous footpath was completed in 1937. It's visited all the time by people who enjoy day hiking, who are looking to section hike, and then those of us who are crazy enough to through hike. A through hike is completing every mile within a period of 12 months. So not a calendar year specifically, but from the day you start, you have a 12-month period to hike every mile in between those two endpoints. Upon completion of the AT, you can fill out the 2,000-miler application form saying that you have hiked every mile in between those 2 points, submit it to the ATC, and they will send you a patch and a 2,000-miler certificate. Now, if you're not able to complete the whole trail in an entire through hike, you get the same certificate if you complete the trail over a period of 20 plus years. So whether you are a through hiker who gets it all done in a 12-month period or somebody who has to chip away at it for a long time, you all end up a part of the same club, the 2,000-miler club. Some of your gear selection, like your sleeping bag, for example, might be dependent upon what time of year you start, but also what direction you're going to be traveling in. So let's cover those different options and the pros and cons of each of them. Going northbound, or as you'll probably hear a lot, NOBO, is the most common direction to travel on a through hike of the Appalachian Trail. That means that you would start at Springer Mountain in Georgia and finish on Mount Katahdin in Maine. Most NOBO hikers will start sometime in early March till the end of April and finish their hikes anywhere from the beginning of September till even mid-October. Now, there are certainly people who knock it out much more quickly than that, but for example, I started March 29th and I did not finish until October 19th. Now, generally, the rule of thumb is you want to try to finish your hike by October 15, because after that, Mount Katahdin is open depending on the weather. Some of the pros of going in a northbound direction are, first, you're going to be around a lot of other hikers because this is the direction that people tend to travel. So if you're starting off solo, but you wish that you were going to be around others, then this might be the best option for you. Also, if you're a beginner, certainly I would recommend being as self-sufficient as possible before you get out there, but just knowing that you can learn from other people around you can be a comforting thing. Another benefit of going northbound is the terrain starting off in Georgia is not near as challenging as Katahdin and the other areas in Maine and then the White Mountains in New Hampshire. So you can start off gradually building up your strength and stamina to prepare for the harder mountains at the end. Going northbound, your first trail stop is Neal Gap, and from the approach trail, it's within 40 miles. So if you've made any mistakes with your gear or your food, then you're gonna hit a store pretty quickly to help correct those issues early on. And also, Mountain Crossings, the outfitter at Neal Gap, does a free pack shakedown, so you can sit and go over your gear with somebody who is very experienced, and they can suggest some changes to you to maybe lighten your pack, or say, hey, maybe you don't actually need 3 different stoves and 2 different water filters, etc. Going northbound, you're more likely to get trail magic along your hike. I know a lot of people feel like going southbound, they kind of got left out and forgotten, didn't receive a lot of trail magic. And if you're not familiar with trail magic, you will be by the time you finish the trail, especially if you go NOBO. But it's basically random acts of kindness where people might leave a cooler by the road with snacks and drinks, or set up a whole booth along the trail cooking hamburgers and hot dogs. But anyway, there's just more trail community around the northbound thru hikers than the southbound or other directions. And I would definitely recommend a thru hike in the northbound direction because I feel the trail gets more beautiful as you go along. Springer Mountain is nice, but it's nothing like the epic grand finale of summiting Mount Katahdin. Now let's talk about some of the cons of a NOBO thru hike. First, you'll be around a lot of people. For those of y'all who are looking for a more serene experience, then maybe NOBO is not your cup of tea. Also, going in a northbound direction, because there are so many people, you might have more difficulty with finding vacancies at hostels and hotels in town. And finally, as I mentioned before, you are limited to when you can finish the trail, because although you might have all the time in the world, the seasons are going to change regardless, and eventually winter will come and they will close Mount Katahdin for thru hikers to pass through. One thing that I did learn though is there is winter climbing on Mount Katahdin, so I assume if you made it that far and for some reason they had closed the mountain down, you could always finish in that winter climbing time period. Just a little loophole for you. And now going the opposite direction for a southbound or SOBO hike is the second most popular direction that thru hikers travel on the AT. For a SOBO hike, you would obviously start your journey at Mount Katahdin in Maine and finish at Springer Mountain in Georgia. And SOBO thru hikers typically begin somewhere from June 1st to July 1st because Mount Katahdin is not open to thru hikers until somewhere right around Memorial Day or just after. Some of the pros of a SOBO hike are: one, you don't have that strict time pressure to finish by a certain date as long as you personally don't have anything going on that means you have to get back home. Two, it's a more peaceful experience because you won't have quite as many fellow thru hikers around. And also, I guess there's some comfort in knowing that if for some reason you didn't finish the trail, you're starting off with the cream of the crop, so you'll get to see all you can. Now for the cons. There certainly won't be as many people to help you out along the way. If you were to get in a bind, you won't see as many fellow hikers, but the AT is still a pretty well-traveled trail. Two, as I mentioned, the community really tends to evolve around the NOBO hikers, so you don't get as much community love going SOBO, but there are definitely still people out there willing to help you. And I feel like most of the SOBO alumni come back to do trail magic for those SOBOs because they too felt left out. Unfortunately, if you start with Mount Katahdin and come southbound, you're in the 100-mile wilderness and you have to go through all of that before you get out and get to a trail stop. So that's a lot to bite off at the beginning, but there are some hostels and shuttle services in Maine, so if you got in a bind or if you wanted to plan for being extracted out of the 100-mile wilderness, that is a possibility. It's just not as straightforward and clean cut as if you start at Springer Mountain and have Neal Gap within 30 to 40 miles, depending on if you do the approach trail or not. The 100-mile wilderness is definitely more challenging than starting off at Springer Mountain, and in general, you're doing a lot of those more challenging miles to begin with. And while that is good in one way because you're getting the tough stuff done early, although the whole trail is difficult, don't be fooled. But I guess I feel like starting off with more rugged terrain and not building your body up to it, you do have more risk for potential injury. And finally, I've heard the black fly situation up north in Maine for SOBOs is pretty rough. I've never experienced that myself, but I can say the bugs aren't just a walk in the park starting out going northbound either, but I just know that SOBOs specifically complain a lot about those black flies. The third option is a flip-flop, and this is really a combination of going northbound and southbound, and just not in a traditional way. A lot of flip-floppers start off their hike at maybe Harper's Ferry, which is said to be the spiritual halfway point of the AT. And people will go northbound from there to Mount Katahdin, and then when they get done with Katahdin, go back to Harper's Ferry and hike southbound to finish up at Springer Mountain. Now you can do this in all sorts of different ways. This is just one example. One reason that somebody might opt to do that particular plan is they want to start as early as possible in the year, but they can't start when a northbounder would typically begin their hike, like beginning of March up to beginning of April. So rather than being stressed out about finishing in time on Katahdin, they just kind of jump ahead so they can have a more relaxed trip. Another example of flip-flops that I've seen people do is you start your hike at Springer Mountain with all the other NOBOs, and if you end up having some sort of injury, or maybe you've got a wedding or graduation back home that you've got to get off trail for, it kind of puts you behind, then at some point along the trail, if you realize, okay, I'm not going to be able to finish this doing a true straightforward northbound hike, then you can flip up to Katahdin from wherever you're at, and then once you finish on Katahdin, turn around and hike back south to the point where you originally flipped at. There are a lot of variations as to what a flip-flop hike can be, and the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, known as the ATC, still recognizes this as a valid through hike as long as you complete it all in the one through hiking season. And the ATC actually is encouraging the flip-flop type through hike because it prevents having so much traffic in one place at one time, which unfortunately continues to degrade the trail and has higher impacts on the natural resources surrounding the trail. So some of the pros for a flip-flop hike obviously are the minimizing environmental impact, and as I mentioned, not having a strict timeline, and in a way you can kind of plan for the best seasonal weather in different areas when you want to be there. And in doing this, you'll have more of a unique experience and have more time alone with nature. I'm sure that you'll still be crossing paths with people on trail, and depending on how you do it, you can really be a NOBO with that bubble of northbounders for a while, but also flip and potentially be with southbounders for a while. As far as the downsides of a flip-flop, in my opinion, if you're not looking to be alone, you probably will have more alone time than you prefer. Also, flip-flopping can be a little bit more expensive than either a northbound or southbound hike because you have the travel expenses associated with each time you flip and go to a different location. And finally, I feel like a flip-flop can be a little anticlimactic depending on where you're flipping at, especially if it's just at a random trailhead and you finish your through hike there instead of summiting a mountain. For me, I wouldn't love that as much, but it doesn't make the achievement any less great. Basically, you just have to sit down, figure out what your schedule will allow for, what your personal preferences are, and what you're looking to get from the trail experience. But keep in mind those tentative dates of June 1st when Katahdin opens and October 15th when it could close. You just never know what the weather will do. Now I want to talk about hiking as a solo hiker on the AT versus being a part of a group. Fortunately for me, I got to kind of experience the best of both worlds. I started off as a solo hiker who didn't know anybody out on trail, but quickly, like most other solo hikers, especially those going northbound, I kind of got in with a pack of other solo hikers who turned out to be what we call on trail my tramily, my trail family. Some of my best memories from the trail were made in those couple hundred miles that I hiked with this group of 9, and I made some lifelong friendships out of it. But eventually we kind of dispersed and went our own ways, different speeds and goals, and also unfortunately some people left the trail. So if you're feeling a little uneasy about being a solo hiker out on the AT, if you're going in a northbound direction especially, but even your other options, there are a lot of people out on the AT, and it's very rare that you'll be alone for long. But there are definitely benefits to both solo hiking and hiking with a group. But before you sit at home because you don't have a hiking partner, or before you beg somebody to go that really might not make a great hiking partner, listen to some of these points. One of the things that I loved about being a solo thru hiker is I was the boss. I made the schedule. I decided how many miles were going to be hiked that day. If I felt like sleeping in, I could. If I wanted to not hike, then that was always an option. If I decided, you know, self, do I want to take a zero today? Yeah, I think so. It's just really nice not having to consult somebody else all the time. And maybe that sounds like a selfish thing, but up to this point, 28 years of my life, I had pretty much considered other people in everything. So having that opportunity to truly be free and do what you want every single day is a really nice thing. When you have an injury or an illness, you don't have to worry about feeling guilty because you're holding somebody else up. And also, I've seen couples or friends who are out on the trail together, and one was injured to the point where they might not be able to finish in time. So what does the hiking partner do? Do they go ahead and say, well, see you down the trail, or do you get off trail with your partner, or maybe push it to the limit up to a certain time and wait it out to see if they're going to get better? As a solo hiker, you don't have to stress over any of that. You can just worry about yourself and listen to your own body. Lodging availability is a little bit simpler when you're a solo hiker. Even if a place is full, a lot of times if it's just one hiker that needs a bed or some floor space, then somebody's willing to work it out. But as soon as you have two or more, it's like, oh, sorry, we're booked. And alone time. Some people like it, some people not so much. I really value spending time alone, in my mind, in my thoughts, and it's really a healthy thing. So even if you feel like you don't enjoy it, you probably need it in your life more than you know. But just having some time to reflect on what I wanted to do once I got done with this epic journey, or maybe come to terms with some mistakes that I've made in my life, or whatever it was, I was able to have that alone time. If you've got somebody else on trail with you that wants to hike with you all the time, then you really don't get that same letting go mentally. And then finally, to spend every waking minute with somebody for 6 months, you really have to know that person and like them a lot. So if you decide that you really don't want to be a solo hiker, I would be very selective about who you take out on the trail with you. Solo hiking is definitely awesome, but there are certainly some benefits to hiking as a couple or with a group. First, you always have the buddy system, somebody watching your back and looking out for you. And hikers tend to do this anyway with other hikers on trail, but I do remember some moments that I was alone on the AT where, for example, I might be fording a river that I felt a little bit uncomfortable about and would have felt more comfortable if I had had a partner. Also, as a couple or with a group, you might share gear. I've seen a guy carry the body of the tent and his girlfriend, fiance, wife carry the poles of the tent. And with couples and groups, it's also fun to share food. I've been in situations where I wanted s'mores really badly, but I didn't want to carry the extra weight of a whole box of graham crackers and a bag of marshmallows and a whole pack of Hershey bars. But when I mentioned it to my tramily, hey, I'm thinking about packing some fun stuff out. Are y'all down? Well, then we ended up getting all sorts of other food too, and strawberries. So it can be really nice having people to share the load with. Now, I will say a warning on sharing gear. This can work well as long as y'all have similar speeds, and if not, if you're not hiking together all the time, then you at least have checkpoints of where you're going to meet up throughout the day. That way somebody doesn't end up way far ahead and now the other person doesn't have their tent for the night because for whatever reason they can't possibly catch up. And also you want to make sure that you can trust the person that you're sharing equipment with, and it's terrible that I have to say that, but I saw a couple who broke up on the AT and they were sharing a tent, and one of them was mad enough that they stormed off and left the other without a tent. And that was just kind of a crappy situation. I mean, you would think that as adults you could work it out enough until you got to the trailhead and then figure it out from there, but they didn't. So You just want to make sure that you can trust that person you're sharing gear with. Another perk of hiking with a group is shared lodging, which might mean cheaper lodging. If you've got 3 or 4 people who want to share a double bed hotel room together and you have 2 to a bed, well, that greatly reduces the cost and might even be cheaper than if you stayed at a hostel. And certainly you have less people in one space than you would in a hostel. And finally, nothing beats the feeling of camaraderie. Having people around you, rallying you when you're at low points is just something that can really help you keep moving forward. I feel like this is a good place to mention having friends come join you and hike with you some on trail. When I first announced I was going to be through hiking the AT, I had several friends who were like, man, I wish I could go with you, but I can't, but maybe I can come out for a weekend and join you, especially when you're in a beautiful area that I've never been to. Well, it ended up that none of those friends came out to join me, but I was honestly glad in the long run because I made my own pack of friends. And as I got more into the groove of my thru hike, I liked being able to make my plans and do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. So just keep that in mind if you are a solo hiker, even if you're going as a couple or already with a group, that you're going to get into your routine, you're going to get more efficient at packing up camp and setting it up at night. You'll start to increase your mileage because you're going to be training and conditioning for thru hiking every single day. So what I would suggest, if you're definitely going to have a friend come visit you to hike with you on trail, do it early on. Do it before you are conditioned enough to where you're doing 20 plus miles a day and you're at your peak fitness level, because having them come out with fresh legs and not having as much experience will definitely hold you back later on. Now, if you don't think you'll mind having to leave the friends that you made on trail when you fall back with your friend from off trail, then by all means go for it, but it's just something to consider before you make concrete plans to meet somebody out there. Also, if you are going to have somebody join you on trail, I would recommend telling them, when you can come meet me for this certain period, you'll just have to come meet me where I'm at. There's no way that I can plan to meet you at X location on Y date, because I'm going by footpath and I don't want to be pressured to make it here on that certain date. Unless, of course, you do, but that's not something I would have enjoyed on my thru hike. So whether you're going to go it alone or you have a hiking partner planned to go with you, I think it's going to be a wonderful experience for you. I would definitely recommend, if you are going with a group or with a partner, that you sit down and have those conversations about, okay, if we decide that we're hiking at different speeds and I want to do more miles in a day, is it okay if we separate? Are there going to be any hard feelings? Or if somebody ends up injured, what's the plan of action? Do we both quit our thru hike? Those are important things to decide before you get out on the trail. That way nobody ends up surprised or with their feelings hurt. All right, y'all, well, that is all I have for you on today's topic. If you've got any questions, feel free to drop those in the comments. Next up, I'm going to be covering shelters. If you want to check that out, you can click over here. If you'd like to watch the entire All You Need to Know to Hike the AT video that's split up with timestamps per section, you can check that out down here. Or if you would like to watch my thru hike of the Appalachian Trail, you can check that out down here. Thanks so much for watching, and we will see y'all next time.